Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk about some of the basics of food storage, including what kind of items you can store, what kind of items I like to store, how to store them, and then in my mind the differences between a long-term food storage, meaning anything over, up to 2 years, so 20-30 year food storage, and then what I like to call just a pantry, so basically long-term food storage, and then a small rotating pantry. So for me, the two categories are anything that I'm actually going to rotate through on a regular basis, and then this is my set it and forget it kind of stuff. I don't want to have to constantly rotate a whole basement full of shelves full of food just so I can have a long-term food storage. I want to eventually build up to maybe having anywhere from 3 to 10 years worth of food for me and maybe my future family. So here are some of the things that I'm going to store long term that I'm just going to set and forget, like I said, for 20-30 years unless an emergency comes up. I lose my job, or we have some sort of economic crisis, or anything where I'm not going to be able to buy food regularly. That's the only time that I'm going to actually access any of this stuff. And like I said, this is going to be everything else, that I'm just going to eat regularly. This is basically my emergency stuff that I'm going to store, leave it, and maybe never eat it. Now, all this stuff that I want to last a long time, I'm going to package in different sized Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers to make them truly last, and then I'm going to stick it in 5-gallon buckets for protection from mice and water and anything like that. But so that's going to be my long-term stuff, and it's all the, like I said, boring stuff: rice, oats. That's includes other kinds of grains, just whole grains, or wheat or red oats, or any kind of grains. Doesn't really matter. But these are the kind of things that I'm going to store and just slowly build up. All of these have been proven to be able to last, I'm going to say indefinitely, but there haven't been any samples of somebody opening up packages of these that are 100 years old. But there have been plenty of examples of people opening these up in 10, 20, and 30 years and making food with them and eating them, and they've been just fine. So these are just kind of the basics of survival. So rice, oats, pasta, and beans would be like the bulk of your food. Now this category, like I said, is going to be pretty much everything else. So again, this is like my emergency, long-term, the more the merrier, not going to touch it unless I absolutely have to category. And this one is going to be everything else that I eat regularly. All my stuff goes in my fridge, cupboards, canned soups and vegetables, fruits, things like that. Anything that can last on its own without proper storage, from 0 to 2 years. Even some canned soup will often come with expiration dates. With expiration dates that are a year or two out, and that's just how you get it from the store. Like Campbell's chunky soup. I used to buy those and eat those all the time, and some of them, like I said, their expiration date would be a year or two out already. This kind of stuff, I want to have enough of it to feed me for like 3 to 6 months. So that's still going to be a pretty big pantry, but it's the stuff you eat regularly. The reason I want to have about 3 to 6 months of this kind of stuff in my pantry is because I don't want to have to access this unless it's truly an emergency. So 3 to 6 months of this, if it is an emergency, say you lose your job, or say everyone's losing their jobs, something where that you're not going to be able to regularly buy stuff from the stores, or maybe the stores have empty shelves. Anything major. If this kind of thing isn't going to cut it, then that you're going to have to start digging into this, and you can also start rationing this and blending this in with it. So if you have 3 to 6 months of this regular kind of stuff that you eat all the time, if you start throwing in more rice and pasta and beans into those meals, you can make this regular stuff, this normal stuff, last a lot longer than this, and give your family more of a sense of normality for a longer time in an emergency. All right, so here's everything I've put up so far. I got granulated sugar. I did one of salt and what did I put in that one? Cornstarch. I don't know how well that'll store. I just kind of wanted to see if it would turn out okay. More sugar, and then I've got, that one's empty, that one's empty. These ones are getting ready for flour, but they're empty. And then I got pinto beans. This is in a 4-gallon or 5-gallon bag. And then I've also got rice. Got several full of rice. And I had these buckets. I've got a whole bunch of buckets I got from a place I used to work at. And so I'm going to put it in the buckets. You don't have to put it in buckets, but it will greatly help you keep mice from chewing through these bags, because mice will chew through these bags. So that's what I just did today. I didn't do any noodles or anything like that, just all the grains, rice. Oh, I did some quick oats. I don't know how well those will store or how long they'll store for, so I'm testing that out as well. So I just did a 1-gallon bag. But that's it, and I'll show you how to seal them up. Now I'm going to show you how to store some of that long-term food, the rice, beans, grains, things like that, in Mylar bags. These will help it last a lot longer. This is really the way you want to do it if you want it to last a long, long time. So there's all sorts of different sizes Mylar bags. What I have here is a 5-gallon bag and a 1-gallon bag. And this might be a 4-gallon bag, but I've included links to 1-gallon and 5-gallon bags in the description. And I like to buy the kits that come with bags and enough oxygen absorbers to supply all of those bags. The way oxygen absorbers work is once you expose it to air, you can see this is in an airtight sealed package. Once you expose these to air, they're going to start sucking the oxygen out of the air. The air is comprised mostly of oxygen and nitrogen, and oxygen is what will help contribute to bugs growing, and the food going bad. So you want as little oxygen in your food storage as you can, and that's what these are for. So again, I've included links below to both these kits. They come with enough oxygen absorbers to supply all the bags in those kits. The big bags, what I'm going to store in them is going to be the rice, grains, things like that. And then what I'm going to store in the smaller bags is going to be sugar and things that I want in smaller containers. I don't want a whole 5-pound bucket of sugar to have too much moisture in it and lose a whole 5-gallon bucket of sugar all at once. I'd rather lose a gallon of sugar if something happens. And so I'll package these and put them in 5-gallon or 4-gallon buckets to help protect them even more. But basically, let's get to it. One thing I forgot to mention is anything like salt and sugar that tend to cake together when they get moisture or anything like that in, you don't want to use an oxygen absorber in. So these can last, these have been proven to last pretty much indefinitely anyway without such storage. So for salt, sugar, cornstarch, things like that, I'm going to put them in the bags, but I'm not going to put oxygen absorbers in them. So basically all you're going to do is whatever size bags you get, you're going to fill them up, and whatever you put in there, you want to make sure, you don't need to leave this much, but you want to make sure you leave at least 2 or 3 inches so that you can close it properly and get it nice and flat to get a nice seal. And I'll show you how to do that. Alright guys, I accidentally did a bunch of these without the camera on, so I'll keep doing the rest. But once you've got your oxygen absorbers, they're going to come in different cc's is how their size is measured. I have a bunch of little ones. These are 300 cc's, and then I've got some more. These just have more material in them. They look the same size, but they're more dense. And these are 500 cc's. I'll leave a link to a recommended amount of cc's per size of bags you're using and the type of items. With these, you can't really use too much. It's not going to do any harm if you put 10 times the amount in there that you're supposed to. It's just going to waste oxygen absorbers. But for these 5-gallon bags, I'm going to put 2,000 cc's worth of oxygen absorbers, and it's going to take about 7 of these little 300 ones. And then this gallon bag that I just did, what did I put in there? I just put about 500, so I put 2 of those 300 cc ones in here. One thing to remember, make sure you label the bags before you seal them up, because if you go and do a bunch of different items and just seal them all, you're going to have a real hard time remembering which is which. I remember that these are oats just because I did it very first, and it's the only 1 gallon that I'm sealing right now. But just make sure to write what it is, and then I like to write the date that it was packed. So what's today? I don't know, August 9th or something. And then that way when you open it, you know, however far down the road, you know exactly what it is, when it was packaged, and that'll be really helpful. So I'll go ahead and just do a bunch of these and let you watch. That's how it's going to turn out, by the way. You can see the top, it's nice and sealed up, nice and airtight. The oxygen absorbers, as they absorb the oxygen that's in this bag, they're going to slowly, it's going to shrivel up and crinkle up against the material, some of the time at least. It depends on how much air is in there. So I like to use a board. If you are using a hair straightener, because I'm just using a regular iron, so I need the board. If you're using a hair straightener, you don't need this because you can just seal like this. You know, just seal from the top. But I do need it. Don't have written on it. You just want to make sure your surface is nice and flat. You want to make sure that there's no air lines in it. And one thing I like to do with the taller bags is I'll seal both sides but leave a gap in the middle so that I can manually suck some more air out of it. And that just helps get rid of some of the air. So you can see right here I didn't seal that middle section. Let's see if this will work. With that little section I left unsealed, I'm going to slip a straw in there just to make it easier if I can. And I'm just going to suck out some of the excess air like a giant juice box. Just so it has an easier time getting all that air out of there. And then I'll make sure I seal off that gap. Make sure everything's nice and sealed. And that's it. So this bag, I sucked out a good amount of air, but it's going to crinkle up even more as more of that oxygen is absorbed. And I'll put a picture of that later. These are some of the biggest things you're going to want to be mindful of when you're making your food storage. Whether it be your pantry stuff or your long-term food storage, these are the things that are going to make your food unsafe to eat. So first off, moisture. It's one of the biggest destroyers of food storage. If you have stuff in number 10 cans and you allow too much moisture, those cans are going to rust through and that will ruin the food. Also, if you have too much moisture, say in one of these buckets of, like I just did, rice, if I have too much moisture in there, it's going to allow that rice to mold and get mildewy, and it'll help bugs grow and things like that. And so you want to be real careful about moisture. Oxygen. With these Mylar bags that I put the oxygen absorbers in there, the biggest reason for that, as gross as it sounds, is to make sure that you don't have bugs hatch in your food. Number 3, sunlight. If you're storing Mylar bags, you want to make sure that they're thick enough that when you hold them up to the light, they're not very see-through. The reason for that is the thinner they are, the easier it is for sun and those UV rays to get into and degrade your food. It'll degrade the bags, it'll degrade the food. And if you're not storing in bags, say you're storing in, I've seen people store in like soda bottles, things like that, which I think is fine. But you have to make sure you keep it out of the sun because those will degrade the plastics, and the chemicals in the plastics will degrade from the UV and may contaminate your food. So you got to be careful of that. All right, and the last one, bacteria, for me is mostly a detriment to canned goods, you know, canned soups, canned fruit, things like that, just because they have a really high moisture content. And if there's already bacteria in there, or if the can leaks, bacteria can get in there, and the moist environment is a perfect environment for bacteria to thrive, whereas dried goods, It's not quite as easy. So a general rule of thumb for me, especially with canned goods, is when you open it, or let's say before you open it, if it's very rusty and it's not just surface rust, or if it's bulging, meaning it has gases developing inside of it, don't want to eat it. Just throw it out right away, especially if it's bulging, because that's a bad sign. And once you open it, with all food storage, if it looks okay, if it smells okay, and if you taste it and it tastes okay, it's most likely okay. There's most likely nothing wrong with it. An example is tuna, canned tuna fish. I keep canned tuna fish in my rotating pantry. I don't put it in like buckets or anything because condensation will make them rust. But I've opened cans that I stored for the last like 2, 3, 4 years and make tuna fish sandwiches with them, and it looks fine, it tastes fine, and it's just fine. And so that's what I go by. So this is how I would recommend you build and expand on your food storage. The first 2 steps are basically the same. I would go through your pantry and look at calories on things, and based on just an average 2,000, just for easy math, 2,000 calories a day per person, I would start and make sure you have at least 1 to 2 weeks of just the normal stuff you eat all the time. You know, canned stuff, noodles, whatever you have in your cupboards, whatever you have in your pantry right now. I would make sure you've got at least 1 to 2 weeks of that, and then just slowly add on. If you can only buy a couple cans at a time, that's fine. You know, next time you go to the grocery store, just buy 1 or 2 more cans of, Campbell's soup, or, 1 more bag of pasta or something like that, and put it away. And then next time you go, just buy another 1 or 2 cans or whatever you can, and just slowly build it. It's going to depend, or it's going to be different for everyone based on your budget and where you need to put your money. So, the point is to have a goal towards working towards a larger pantry or a larger food storage. So I would build up to 1 to 2 weeks and then slowly build that into at least a month's worth of pantry before I do any of this other stuff. The reason for that is if you have less than this, and I kind of talked about this earlier, but if you have less than like a month of a pantry and, say you lose your job, you're just going to have to open all this long-term stuff, all these Mylar bags anyway, and it's going to be kind of pointless to have done this. And so I would make sure you have at least a month-long supply of pantry for you and your family. And then I would start on your long-term stuff. I probably wouldn't build up too much more than maybe a month's worth at first, and I would just do the basics. I would just do grains and rice just because they're cheap, they're really easy to start, and they have a lot higher likelihood of lasting a long time without any care, just keeping them out of moisture and sunlight and things like that. And so that's what I would do next. After you've got maybe a month so of your long-term stuff in bags like this, then I would build your pantry even larger. If you've got the space, if you've got a big pantry or you've got a closet or maybe in your basement, stock up on the things that you're going to eat regularly. Like I said before, just even if you have to do just a couple cans at a time, slowly build that until you have enough food for you and your family for anywhere from 2 to 6 months of the stuff you eat regularly. You don't want to, if you lose your job, all of a sudden have to switch to eating rice and beans, every day, like I said before, because that can kind of mess with your mentality. And so I would build up at least a 2 to 6 month pantry. And then after that, I would start to build a longer or a larger amount of this long-term stuff. I mean, it's up to you, but for me, the more the merrier. I wouldn't be opposed to having 20 years worth of food stockpiled in my basement, as long as it doesn't affect your living in the now. You don't want to mess up your current life. You don't want to spend money on things like this when you need to spend it on other things now. But the point is just to slowly build as you can. That's when I would start to expand on the variety of stuff that you've got stored. That's when you're going to want to start adding, sugar and salt and, all sorts of other variety of things. Alright guys, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching the video. I hope it gave you some pointers. If you have any comments or other suggestions, I'm still learning as well. Go ahead and put those in the comments below. And make sure to check out the links I put below. I put some links for Mylar bag and oxygen absorber kits that are really cheap. Those are what I bought, and it's just nice to have the appropriate size bag with the appropriate size oxygen absorbers right off the bat before you start long-term food storaging anything. Thanks for watching and have a good one.